looking at function notation a little closer, we're going to be using the formal notation f of x. Y is a function f of x. You'll often see it written as y equals f of x. F is a function name. It's not a variable. So this isn't multiplication over here. This is f of x. Function name. And sometimes you'll see it as g of x or h of x. It's just the way of naming a function. Y is the output or the dependent variable. X is inside the function, so it's the independent variable or the input. And they go through the different ways of looking at that. But oftentimes you'll see, for example, when you're using a graphing calculator, you'll see y equals 3x plus 1, and you can type it into your equation editor. But that's the same as if you saw f of x equals 3x plus 1. So the common error, again, is that's not f times x, so we can't divide off the f. That's f of x, and it just means the function and the input variable is x. So here we're given a function, f of x equals, and we're given some rational function. Evaluate and simplify the following. Evaluate means we're going to be plugging in the number here for every x. We're going to plug in that number. And then simplify means get rid of parentheses, combine like terms. So for this first example, I go to the f function. I take out the x's here, all of them, and replace them with -3s. Now when you take out a variable, it's important that you put in parentheses because you're going to have to put that number inside the parentheses. And there's a difference between a -3 in parentheses squared and just a -3 squared. We'll see that in a second here. So then again, take out the x, put in -3, and then take out the x, put in -3. Everything else is the same. Simplify the numerator first. In other words, and if you need to, type it into your calculator. And if you're going to use your calculator, make sure you put in the parentheses when you do this. So for here, -3 squared, -3 times -3 is +9, -3 times -3, another +9, plus 1. Over -3 plus 3 is 0. Now if you use your calculator, that's fine. Type it all in and then just write down the output. 19 divided by 0. But 19 divided by 0 is undefined. You cannot divide by 0. So that is your final answer. If the 0's on top, 0 divided by a number is 0. But if it's underneath, it's undefined. So now do the same thing with f of 1. Go back to the f function. Take out all of the x's. Write down everything else the same. All you're doing is taking out the x's, and then you're going to replace those blank spots with what they tell you inside parentheses. So I'm going to be sticking in the number 1. And again, you can type it all into your calculator all at one time. But compute the numerator first. So in the numerator, I should get a -1. It's going to be +1 minus 3 plus 1. And the denominator is going to be 4. This fraction doesn't reduce. There is no need to write it as a decimal. It doesn't say anything about writing it as a decimal. So we're going to keep our answers as exact answers unless we're told otherwise. And if we're told otherwise, it'll say round to so many decimal places. So we'll keep it exact and we'll keep it reduced. For the last one, same thing. We go back up to the f function, take out all of its x's, do the same on the bottom, but then replace it with what's inside parentheses here, b minus 2's. Should be a square up here. All right, so I go back to my original. I took out the x, left the square, minus 3, took out the x, put in my b minus 2 plus 1. Did the same for the bottom. So to simplify this, all right, b minus 2 taken twice means write it down 2 times. Minus 3. And there's just one b minus 2 here. Plus 1. And on the bottom, there is no number in front. And then, well, actually, there's the number 1. So if I distribute the 1, it's just going to be b minus 2 plus 3. So the denominator is going to be pretty easy to handle. That's just going to be b minus 2 plus 3. That's b plus 1. It's the numerator that gets to be a little chunky. I'm going to have to FOIL, or use the distributive property twice here. So b times b times negative 2. All right, now take the number negative 2 and multiply negative 2 times b, and negative 2 times negative 2. Now I'm going to take the number negative 3 and multiply that through using distributive property. Negative 3b, negative 3 times negative 2, positive 6, and then I still have the plus 1. Now combine like terms. So I have a b squared, that's the only squared term I have in the problem. I have a negative 2, a negative 2, and a negative 3. So when I add those up, it's going to be a negative 7b. And then I have a positive 4, a positive 6, and a positive 1. Leaves me with positive 11 over b plus 1. And that's it. That's as simplified as you need to get. All right. So to kind of recap here, if the 0, and you'll see this happen a few times in this course, if the 0 is underneath, the fraction's undefined. But let's say it had been flipped. Let's just make a separate problem here. If this had been 0 over 19, then our answer is 0. And you can test this out with your calculator. Take 0 divided by 19, you should see the number 0. But if you take 19 and divide it by 0, it'll say error, or it'll say undefined on your calculator.